Welcome back to another episode of Dazed and Infused. I'm Latham Woodward, your host, as always. And today we are with Angelica Sanchez from Perfect Union. Angelica, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And, in the YouTube version of this, I was just doing some captions for us to put this up on YouTube.
Mhm.
Your title is Senior Director of Government Affairs and Compliance. It sounds a little dry,
Yeah.
but here's reality. In the cannabis world, these things are crucial to the proper organization of a dispensary and to getting cannabis products to the public. And so what you do is very vital. So if you're watching this on YouTube, stick around. I think you're going to find something interesting in this YouTube broadcast. And if you're listening on audio, please stick around. So we're going to start this interview with the same way we start every interview, and that is, and Helga, tell us your historical relationship to cannabis and how did you come to this?
Come to this. I started in the cannabis industry in January of 2016. So I was actually a customer at River City Phoenix, which was our first store. That was our name back then, back in 2016. And I started working there as a bud tender. So I entered the cannabis industry when we were doing things deli style. So Prop 64 hadn't passed yet. And so
Hmm.
it was just a different landscape. So everyone had to have a medical recommendation. We would have bulk weight. We'd have all of our cannabis, in mason jars for our customers to smell and to look at, and we would weigh it out for them. And it was just a different landscape.
Literally the good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. And it's funny
Yeah.
that you say that because you don't know they're the good old days until you look back.
Yeah, but it was a nice time in the cannabis industry in terms of like, everyone would moan about, oh, I've got to get my medical thing, and we'll just call Dr. Bob in Malibu. He'll get you set up in 15 minutes. But the reality is that that was a really good time in California for the business. It wasn't quite as complex, let's say,
Yeah,
right?
it wasn't nearly as taxed or as regulated.
Yeah.
So
So you
yeah,
came up through the business. That's the kind of the old grocery store model, when you meet
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, a manager of Safeway or something like that. That guy
Sort
has come
of.
up from the bottom.
Yeah, it was actually just a really opportune time. So I was working as a bud tender while I was attending college at Sacramento State to get my degree in political science. So they kind of went hand in hand as Prop 64 passed, and we had to navigate, these new regulations and regulatory bodies.
That's really cool. And so we're gonna jump ahead a little here. Um after the initial question, I mean, the apprentice program you guys have for bud tenders, is that something you spearheaded?
Yeah, so I was actually a part of the apprenticeship program whenever we started it back in January of 2017. Obviously, the apprenticeship program had to be placed on hold just because the regulations were ever changing. And so the curriculum for the apprenticeship was changing.
Right.
But we partnered with UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, which is the union that we're unionized here at Perfect Union, to put that apprenticeship program. And so we were actually able to graduate a handful of bud tenders through the apprenticeship program to become journeymen. And so we're currently working on the curriculum with the latest updates to the regulations that happened last year.
Wow, that is incredible. I know that recently another union organization has been denied their union application, and I
Mhm.
think it was through United Farm Workers, I think, and they did not
Yeah,
approve
no,
it, which
I,
is
I read that
disappointing.
article. Yeah, so technically they weren't a bona fide labor organization, and I'm not really sure how the state recognizes a labor organization as being a bona fide one. But UFCW, as well as a handful of others like the Teamsters, are bona fide labor organizations, and it's really a requirement for the cannabis industry if you have more than 20 employees to sign an LPA with a union, and this just ensures that the employees in this new industry are well taken care of.
That is incredible. I don't think very many people at home realize that about the industry.
Mhm.
And what benefits do people get by being in the union? Do they get pension benefits or?
Yeah, so actually, I sit on the Total Trust Retirement Board on their IAP. So essentially, they have an individualized account plan that we pay into. So it's 40 cents per hour, and so that's the closest that we can get to a retirement plan for them, since it's not federally legal. And the union also gives them other benefits, right? So they get a living wage, they get medical care, they get vision, they get dental, as well as just a way to keep their jobs if there are any issues in the future. Another third party that can act as a mediator if they have any issues in the company. And so I think that having, unions all together is just a really good way to protect our employees and ensure that they have the rights.
Well, that's actually something I didn't expect to hear today. So you must have a great employee retention then.
Yeah, we do have a really good employer retention. I'm a great example. I've been here for 8 years, and I stayed. I fell in love with this job not only because I love cannabis, but because the benefits were really great. I got medical, dental. While I was attending college, I didn't have that beforehand, so it was just an added benefit. It was one less thing for me to worry about. When I was going to the dentist or I was making an appointment or anything like that. Um,
Despite, I'm going to say a disclaimer here. This show is brought to you by Perfect Union, but these are things I did not know about Perfect Union. And myself being in the cannabis business for a long time with multiple brands, I have not encountered this before. Honestly, I've never really encountered an organization that cared enough to put all this stuff together. And you guys have currently 200 plus employees, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I
Oh.
think because we started before cannabis was legalized by Prop 64, that we've always seen cannabis as a way to take care of the community, and part of the community is our employees.
That is a really great outlook for not only the company, but for your employees. How is the same management group still intact from that time when you
Yeah.
started?
Yeah,
Wow.
definitely. So when I transitioned from being a bud tender and a supervisor and writing our license applications and things like that, I worked with Tom and Mike and Sean and all of the people that are running the organization today. So it's really nice to see that we're all still here.
That is really impressive. I'm blown away actually. So it's good to hear all this. Let's go to a different territory here, and that is my experience in the cannabis industry. I've seen a lot of Latina women. And Angelica Sanchez, I'm guessing you're Latina.
Yes, yes, I am. And it's funny that you say that, because when I started working at River City, Phoenix, my family was really worried. They were like, Mia, they're gonna leave you holding the bag, because it just didn't it wasn't the industry.
Stigma, right? The stigma.
Yeah, the stigma was with it. And so, now 8 years later, they're really proud of the work that I've done here, and, who I've become and how I've grown and how this business and this industry has grown.
That is cool. And despite my name being Latham Woodward, I am actually of Chilean descent. So it's a big group out here. So, yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I've met so many dynamic Latinas in this business, and it seems like, um, Latina women have really embraced the business, and they really are steering it in a really good direction in so many ways, shapes, and forms. And that includes brand ownership. That includes, what you do, and that includes running dispensaries. I've had a number of women on my show that run dispensaries. So it's pretty impressive, I have to say. Um, what do you think the biggest hurdles are right now in terms of compliance that affects the consumer, right? Because this is where a viewer or listener of the show is going, well, why would this matter to me? Well, I think it does matter, and it matters more than people think. So where are there sticking points, and where are there highlights and possible reforms happening in compliance?
In compliance, yeah. So I think I oversee retail cultivation and distribution. So depending on which facet you wanted to look at, I would say that retail is already very heavily regulated. Right now, everything is, packaged, it's childproof, it's tested. And there's so many regulatory hurdles that we have to go through as a retailer to ensure that, that we're giving the consumer something that doesn't appeal to children, something that's been tested, something that isn't expired, et cetera. And those are the things that we as a retailer want to make sure that we're making sure that we're ensuring our vendors are taken care of. As far as cultivation, also very heavily regulated. There was actually a bill that passed this year, which I was very excited about, which is SB 622. And this ensured that we wouldn't have to use the plastic UID tags on all of our plants. Because if you went to our cultivation facility every day after we would harvest, there would be a dumpster full of plastic tags, for the thousands of plants that we rotate through.
Right.
And so that was a regulatory requirement. Obviously, it was a really good idea when they were making it in the boardroom, but actually, when it's executed, it ended up being a really bad environmental impact. And so that's legislation that I'm really excited that's going to roll out next year. Well, they haven't figured out what's going to substitute for that. It's nice that we won't have to individually tag each plant because there isn't another product that is tracked from seed to sale the way that cannabis is from cultivation. And then just as far as distribution, I think our biggest challenge right now is just ensuring that our packaging and labeling is correct because there are 3 different pages of the DCC sends out on what is required for your packaging and your labeling. And I think for us, it's just our biggest challenge is keeping up with all of these regulatory frameworks to ensure that we're staying compliant so we can continue selling legal cannabis.
You brought up some really good points here. And number one is recycling in the industry. And I think there are moves afoot to get into more recyclable products for sure. Yesterday, I was interviewing Anna Wiley.
Oh, from Cam,
Yeah.
yes.
And believe it or not, right in the middle of the interview or right in the first 10 minutes, the DCC came knocking on our door for a surprise inspection. We had to end the interview. And it had been scheduled for a long time. And they just said, no, you got to get out there. We're doing this right now. It's like, wow, that is pretty weird. But,
Weird. Yeah. Well, they do their drop-in visits. I've probably done like 50 DCC inspections between the 13 licenses that we have. And I actually have a really good relationship with the Department of Cannabis Control because I see them so often.
yeah.
And I think the benefit of overseeing, 10 retail licenses is that if I have an inspection somewhere and there's a correction, I can roll it out to the other 9 locations to ensure that, we're in good standing with the DCC.
For sure. And I have to say that when I had my distribution company, we had surprise inspections, and I actually have nothing bad to say about the DCC and their representatives in the field. They've been incredibly helpful. They've been directionalized in their focus about what you need to do to correct things. They're not an overly punitive organization unless you're really out of compliance. And so my interaction's been good, but having them just drop in during an interview was a little new to me.
Yeah, they usually rarely they'll let you know ahead of time, but they'll usually kind of just drop in and get you unexpected. But that's why ensuring compliance everywhere is so important because you shouldn't have to prepare for it. You should be just ready for an inspection at any time.
Right. And being close to the mothership in Sacramento doesn't help very much because all they have to do is get in their car and go over in 10 minutes.
Yes, and I've probably done more inspections because I have a good relationship with them. So if there's anyone that they wanted to, or they're like, oh, if you want to see a compliant dispensary, come to Perfect Union.
Oh, well, that's perfect. Great. You're the flagship in other words.
Yeah, got to brag about it a little bit.
Yeah, you should. I mean, you've been doing your job. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
Where do you think the business is going in the next year and a half? It's been very tough. Tom Sheridan, the CEO of your company, was on my show, and we talked about, very low profit margin, right?
Mhm.
It's a very big misconception with people that the cannabis growers, cannabis purveyors, retailers, they're making a fortune, a killing. That's just not true right now. So, where do you think in the next year we're going on the retail sphere?
So I'm hopeful for federal legalization. But what I would like more than anything is to lower taxes. I think that's the biggest challenge that any cannabis business is having right now, whether it's retail distribution, cultivation, or manufacturing, is that the taxes are just too high. And there are places like here in the city of Sacramento where we're triple taxed. We have a cultivation here, we pay 4%. We have a distribution, we pay another 4%. And then at retail, we pay 4%. So at the end of the day, the consumer is paying the 12% city tax, the 15% excise tax, the 7.25 sales tax. So it just makes it really hard for us to compete with the black market when we're 2, 3 times more expensive.
Yeah, now let's talk about that briefly. Okay, so when people, you often hear from people, I'm not going to the dispensary, I've got a guy, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's got a guy.
Yeah.
But what you don't get with that guy or that gal who's growing that black market weed is you don't know what they're using, right?
Right.
And you don't know what the chemicals are, you don't know what the source is, you don't know anything about it. So number one, that's bad.
Mhm.
Um, it's just like how do we get away from this and how do we not make this like the prohibition days of the 1920s where you were growing moonshine or brewing moonshine or distilling it,
Mhm.
and that's kind of where we are right now. So wouldn't it be better to relieve the tax burden and make it just like alcohol and have a set number. That's what it is. It's nationally the same, and we can move forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I've had this conversation with different legislators, and they've always justified the excise tax as the sin tax. So essentially, it's like alcohol or tobacco, they see it as a sin, right? So they're going to add this additional taxes for you purchasing this product. But what research and data has shown is that cannabis doesn't have a negative impact. In fact, the city of Sacramento last year, sorry, I'm a little bit of a data nerd, so I'm just going to share a quick study with you to
Oh no,
kind
I
of
appreciate
justify.
this. Believe me.
Is the city of Sacramento actually in 2022 last year, they partnered with a third party consultant. So before they partnered with a third party consultant, all the cannabis businesses in the city of Sacramento had to pay a 1% neighborhood responsibility fee. And this basically was a fee that the city levied on all these cannabis businesses because they were like, cannabis businesses are going to have a negative impact. And so you need to pay in this fund to, help mitigate that. And what's really funny is that the study published and it found that cannabis didn't have a negative impact in the city of Sacramento. It didn't increase crime, it didn't bring down home values, it didn't give youth more access to cannabis. And in fact, it was the complete opposite. Cannabis businesses had a positive impact in the city of Sacramento. They brought in, I believe, $2.3 billion of economic activity. We contributed $20 million to the general fund. And actually, where cannabis businesses were located, saw a decrease in crime because
Hmm.
of the high security standards that they had to have. So I think that a year from now or a year and a half from now, we'll see federal legalization and hopefully some relief on the tax burden, seeing that, cannabis isn't a sin and it isn't, any worse than any business. And actually it's better than those businesses. So I'm really hopeful that, as we come around and more research and more data comes out about how cannabis businesses impact economies and, communities, that, we'll see federal legalization and that we'll see that tax burden. Um,
For sure. I've cited us an interview from many, many years ago, was the retired DEA from the Reagan administration.
yeah.
And he was interviewed about cannabis. And this is many years ago now. Okay, this is back in 16, 15 or 16. And the interviewer was saying, well, certainly you have a lot of crimes around cannabis and cultivation. And the guy came right out and said, that's an absolute falsehood. The data does not back that up. The only data that does correlate to cannabis are financial crimes, meaning they're financially motivated, whether it's theft, murder. Those things were financially motivated. They were not motivated by cannabis. Occasionally you hear about stick-ups and holdups with people ripping weed off. Like yesterday in LA, a guy got 100 pounds ripped off at a dispensary. But
Mhm.
they're financially motivated. These are not things like you very rarely hear, especially in conversations with women's shelters and these kind of things, where like uh, some poor woman is beaten up or girlfriend's beaten up by their boyfriend high. No, it's usually alcohol, and if they happen to be high and alcohol and coke and meth, that's when these things occur. And it's just the whole marijuana, or I hate using the word, the whole cannabis industry has been vilified. And
Yeah.
it continues to be vilified by a very select number of people at this point. And that simply just has to end.
It does. And I feel like there's been a societal shift as of late, at least these last 2 or 3 years, where you're seeing more, like news or articles on the benefits of cannabis and how cannabis has helped people with different ailments, whether it's sleeping or cancer or anything, any of those medical issues. And it's exciting to me that it's become more of a conversation and an open conversation where people are now being more open about their cannabis use. Whereas in, 5 or 6 years ago, they wouldn't, tell their coworker or their neighbor that they, partake in cannabis. And now they're like, oh yeah, I love these gummies. This is my favorite brand. This is the shop that I go to. So it's nice. I feel like we're shifting in the right direction.
Yeah, we are definitely. I believe there's some insurance moves afoot right now to exclude um the exposure to cannabis as a reason for denial of insurance, which is great,
Mhm.
because there's been all sorts of things that people have gotten insurance denied from them, for car insurance, personal health insurance, life insurance. So those are all very positive things. Let's go into a little more data nerd stuff here for a second, okay?
Mhm.
And that is what people don't understand about 280E and what 280E is and what it affects and how it affects a business. Now, I can answer this question as a brand owner myself, but I want to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So 280 essentially says that we can't write off any of our business expenses except for cost of goods sold, which is unfair, because we pay all of our taxes, we cover our medical, our dental, our vision for all of our employees, and those are all things that we're not allowed to write off. And so the descheduling, from Schedule 1, which I can't even believe cannabis is a Schedule 1, which is considered, a drug with no medical value and highly addictive, which you and I and everyone listening to this know is just simply untrue. But if we got it, descheduled to Schedule 2, Schedule 3, then we would be able to, write off some of those tax. So have those tax write-offs, and that would be a significant relief on our finances as a business.
Yeah, and I'll clarify that to the audience a little bit too. That means, for instance, a normal business, your advertising and marketing expense, that's deductible. It means that
Right.
it's really cost of doing business.
Same with our charitable contributions, which we're also not allowed to write off, even though we make them.
Right. So when you go to a dispensary and you see some hardworking people doing a PAD, the old word for it, the patient appreciation day demo there
Yeah.
at the dispensary. You know what? Give them some love, buy their products because they're not getting a write-off for that time or money that they're spending sending that rep to a dispensary, and they're really trying their hardest to give you good products, at least a good deal, you know. And so, I've always said, give them the time of day, and you might be pleasantly, surprised what you get back. Is there anything that you feel could be done in the cannabis business now that would be a positive to not only the community but the business as a whole? That any changes that come to mind for you personally?
As far as our charitable giving or community give back.
That, yeah, sure. Let's address that first, but then, in a more broad-based sense, what does the cannabis business have to do to get more into the hearts and minds of people?
Hearts and minds of people. I think that we do a really good job, just because, we started before it was legalized in the state of California. So we've always put our patients first.
Hmm.
So we have a robust community benefits program. I spearheaded our Weed for Warriors program at the beginning of
Oh,
this year.
love it.
So yeah, and essentially Weed for Warriors project and helps get veterans that need cannabis. So what we'll do is we'll work with our vendors in order to put together, a really big bag of medicine for them, that'll last them a month or two until we have our next event. And so I think with us, it's working together in partnership, with other cannabis businesses to give back to the community, because it's a lot harder now for retailers to do it all on their own, given 280E, given the high taxes and, all of the other hurdles that we have to go through. We've also still kept our patient program. So essentially, if you come in and you have a debilitating illness, you have cancer, you have Crohn's, you have something that you medically use cannabis for, we will put you in our compassion program. And our compassion program was much more robust before Prop 64 passed, but it's something that we've kept up with. So essentially, you're entitled to get, I can't say free, but cannabis for a penny at any of our retail locations if you
Okay.
need it.
That's amazing. You just have to register for that.
Yes, yeah, you have to register for that. You'll bring in your medical documentation, and once we see it the first time, we'll put it in your account, and then you can just come in every month after that.
That is amazing. Now, I'm a proud supporter of Weed for Warriors. I've had them on the show a couple of times, and
Oh,
for
so you know
the
Kieran.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean
Okay.
those guys are amazing, and what they're doing for veterans, especially, it's a shocking amount of PTSD that has occurred, especially with Afghan and Iraqi veterans. And go back in the timeline from season 1, 2, on my other channel, which is also the Dazed and Infused podcast show, but it's on another network. So go back
Yeah.
and listen to that. I mean, it's a powerful. I mean,
No, they're
uh,
doing really good work for the veteran community, and being able to support them is one of the things we're really proud of here.
yeah, and that episode got very emotional. So if you have a vet in your family, you might want to listen to it. It's a worthwhile cause, and I'm glad you're doing that. It's really cool, and I'm continuously surprised by everything that Perfect Union's doing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're trying to do the good work.
Yeah, that's good. One more question before we go to our final question, and that is because you came up through the bud tender scene, right? And
Mm.
you understand it from 16 to now, we're looking at a very different landscape in terms of potency. Okay. What's your personal feeling on this craziness, potency only, that so many dispensaries push?
Oh, I think it's really interesting, and I'm not really sure the dispensaries are pushing it as much as the vendors are pushing it.
Hmm.
Um, for honestly, if I'm being if I'm being frank with you, I feel like it's THC inflation. And I think that it's a consumer education to really teach the customer that it's not all about THC percentage. It's about the strain, it's about the terpenes, it's about the different effects it's going to have on your body. And honestly, everybody's different, right? So it's like you want to try something out, and maybe it's not the thing that's high in THC that fits well with you. Maybe that makes you more anxious or more paranoid, and maybe you want something with a lower THC. So I think it just comes down to ensuring that your customer is educated and that it's not all about THC.
Yeah, it's more about the entourage effect, and it's about good growing practices. It's so much more. I mean, I advise everyone listening or watching the show to look into it because the entourage effect for good, well-grown cannabis is pretty dynamic. Let's go to our final question that we ask every guest on this show, and that is, please tell us a Stony story. It
A
could be about
stony
anybody.
story.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I'll tell a stony story about me.
Okay.
It'll be the first time I ate an edible.
Most of
Yeah,
the Stony stories start with this, by the way.
most of the okay,
Okay.
perfect. So the first time I made chocolate chip cookies, they were infused, and it was my first time making, infused butter, and I was kind of snacking on it while I was baking just to make sure that I had the flavor right. And before I even put the cookies in the oven, I was really high, and I felt really bad about being high because I had to give my friend a ride to the airport. And I got so high that I had to lay down on the couch, and I didn't think I was gonna die, but it felt like I was gonna die just because I was breathing so heavily. And they ended up rebooking their flight to take care of me.
Oh,
And that's when I learned that you can always take more, but you can't take less.
yes.
So yeah. And so with edibles, I always tell people to tread carefully.
That is a very sweet story. Probably the sweetest story I've heard of all the 165 stories I've heard about a Stony story. So that's great. Well, Angelica, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show today. And if you have any questions, is there a place or if the audience has questions for you, is there a place people can reach you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I can give you my email, and you can post it on the video, or I can state it right now if
State it
anyone.
right now, but I also put it on the video.
Okay, beautiful. So it's Angelica at perfect-union.com. So if anyone has any questions or wants to follow up with me, just feel free to reach out.
That is great. And I have to say, Perfect Union's doing the right thing. Unionized employees, great veteran outreach, and good people at the top who've come up from the bottom. Angelica Sanchez, thanks very much for being here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And as always, this show is brought to you by Perfect Union. And go visit them at one of their 11 dispensaries and find what you need. They're all around Northern California, and I will show these in the video. And also, Wild Seed Wellness here. I'll get out of the way, which is in Marysville, another one of their dispensaries. Again, thanks so much for being here, Angelica. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.